Okay, in this section, we'll be kind of talking about what we term phase one core stabilization exercises. These exercises are typically given as a beginner course almost. So this just kind of gets the ball rolling on some of these core strength exercises. If you feel like you're one that doesn't know how to engage the core, kind of struggles feeling like you're engaging the core, this is good for you. So the first exercise that we'll show is called what we call a TA, and that stands for the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis is kind of a deep core muscle that kind of like the corset of your body, and it kind of the fibers kind of crisscross across your stomach, and it kind of when it's engaged, it kind of locks your spine into place. So very important when you're kind of doing a lot of heavy lifting, things like that. So a cue I kind of use for people is, if you were kind of putting on a tight pair of pants, how you kind of suck it in a little bit like that. Or some people kind of use it if you had to pee really bad and you were trying to hold it from peeing in your pants. So Becca, go ahead and kind of engage there. And see, it's not a very big contraction. There's not a lot of movement there. So she's kind of drawing in her belly button towards the table a little bit. You should be able to maintain your normal breathing while you're doing this. A lot of people like to engage your diaphragm and hold your breath. If you are doing that, that's wrong. Maybe back off the contraction a little bit. You should be able to kind of continue breathing. One way that you can kind of palpate to see if you're kicking in this muscle is find the front bones on your pelvis. They should be sticking out right there, and Becca's showing you where to find them. And then you slide inwards just a little bit. And then you want to put some downward pressure with your hands. And then go ahead and do that where you're drawing in your belly button, almost like you have to pee your pants and you're holding it. And you should feel that muscle pop into your fingers. That's a good indication if you're engaging that muscle. Try maybe holding for 5 seconds at first, and doing maybe 10 of these in a set. And you should be doing these throughout the day and kind of programming you and your brain that they should automatically be engaging when you're doing any kind of physical activity. So that's a TA. The next exercise in the series will kind of do is what we call posterior pelvic tilt. This one is going to be a little bit more movement in the TA. So you go ahead and kind of flatten your spine against the table. And you saw that little movement right there that Becca did. This one I usually typically have people hold for about 5 seconds. Again, as it gets easier, you can kind of hold longer. This one's a tough one for people to get. They kind of want to try to engage everything in their legs and almost lift your butt up to get it. But you're just kind of engaging, again, those abdominals, a little bit of your glutes as you're rolling that back. And this shouldn't be painful. If you feel like it's painful to go completely flat, either back it off or just stop the exercise altogether, and it should not be painful. And then you can contact your healthcare provider and, kind of go over it with them. So this is a posterior pelvic tilt. You could do these standing as well. I find that a little bit harder where the table kind of gives you some feedback. You can kind of feel that. And so that's a posterior pelvic tilt. The next exercise would be a ball squeeze and what we call hip abduction against the belt. These are called isometric exercises. So isometric means you're contracting the muscle, but you're not moving, lengthening, or shortening the muscle. So you will be using some pelvic muscles, but also using your core as Becca kind of gets this set up. If you don't have a ball at home, you could use a pillow or like a thick towel in between your knees. Again, you could use a belt, dog leash to wrap around. If you don't have a long enough belt like that, you can kind of hold it with your hands to suffice. So the first thing you want to do is, again, that TA that we talked about, the first exercise in the series, You want to engage that. While you're engaging that, you want to squeeze the ball. Now you don't need to try to pop the ball. It's just a nice easy squeeze. Hold it for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, relax, and then you're going to alternate it and push out against the belt. Trust me, Becca is pushing out against the belt, even though you don't see any movement. Again, it's that isometric contraction. And this is kind of the next step from the TA. You know, once you feel like you've mastered the TA, you kind of move into these next directions and adding, you know, some other movements, make it a little bit more challenging. Again, these should be not painful. I mean, these should be relatively easy, and then just kind of getting the ball rolling as far as the core strength is concerned. So we call this a ball squeeze in belt with a TA. The next exercise in the series is called bridges. As far as phase 1 exercises go, this is probably more on the higher end of phase 1. You could keep the ball if you want to. You don't have to. If you like that ball there, it kind of helps engage some of that inner pelvic hip muscles, your adductor muscles engaged a little bit while you're doing it. So we'll do this kind of a step-by-step with the bridges. You kind of want to do the pelvic tilt, the posterior pelvic tilt first, really squeezing those glutes, and then go ahead and lift the butt off the table. Hold for about 5 or 10 seconds, and then coming on back down. If you feel like your hamstrings, which are the back thigh muscles, are like crampy, you're not engaging your glutes enough on this. You should really, really be squeezing hard on those glutes. You want to keep it in a comfortable range. So I don't care if it's an inch off the table or 3 inches off the table, as long as it's pain-free. That's what we're looking for. Again, this is kind of working the core, working the butt, getting the glute muscles going. And these are bridges. And once we get into these later phases of core stabilization, you can add some dynamic stuff to this to make it a little bit more challenging. But this is kind of the first thing I show as far as bridges is concerned. So the next exercise would be what we call a modified plank. So a modified plank will be on your forearms like Becca is, and then staying on her knees. And then you're lifting up your hips, keeping everything tight, pushing up through your mid-spine a little bit. There you go. And she's keeping kind of a flat tabletop almost position there. This one's kind of you got to gauge it a little bit. You know, I've had people hold 5 seconds, and that was challenging. 10 seconds, you know, somewhere around there. Work your way into that 20 to 30 second range. If you feel like you're breaking form to get to that 30 seconds, back it off. That's not what we're looking for. I want 5 to 10 perfect reps on this versus trying to do 5 good ones and 5 bad ones. This is not about quantity, it's about quality. So those are modified planks. The next and last exercise in this series would be an abdominal crunch. So we'll go back to your back. And for this is a little bit different. I kind of have people, just to kind of take some stress off the back, is keep one knee bent and one knee straight. As far as hand position goes, you can go behind your head like Becca has, or kind of crossing your chest. You gauge it. If you feel like you're tugging on your neck, having your hands behind there, don't do that. We don't need neck problems. So this exercise, you're going to kind of engage those abdominal muscles, lifting your chest up towards the ceiling. Good. Hold it for a second or two and back down. The longer you hold, obviously, the harder it will be and the more challenging it'll be. But this is kind of a safe way to really engage his abdominals without doing like a full sit-up, which generally puts a little bit more stress on that lumbar spine. If you were doing these on the floor in the bedroom and you're lifting and you can see the wall in front of you, you are going too far forward and you need to go more straight up. You can kind of see how Becca is maintaining that neutral spine position as she's coming up. Again, I would put this kind of in the more challenging of the phase 1 exercises, but it's a good way to get those abdominals engaged and challenged.